Welcome to the Fitness Plus Technology Podcast for club owners, operators, and fitness professionals. Each week, host Bryan O'Rourke brings you an expert interview with a global influencer at the crossroads of fitness and technology. You gain the insights, tools, and inspiration you need to stay connected to the pulse for what matters most for your business in the age of exponential technologies.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to the podcast. Can you believe it's almost July? It seems like 3 years has gone by since the beginning of this year with everything that's going on. I'm so happy you joined us today because we have a wonderful guest and a longtime friend, Dan McDonogh. You know, with all that has happened with the pandemic around the world, fitness industry professionals, which Dan is one of those with a tremendous track record, I'll talk about in a moment. But we've been thinking about that. I think we need to talk more about the impact of these changes in the marketplace with the pandemic and what they have meant to industry professionals, group instructors, personal trainers, and others who take care of clients and members around the world. And so having Dan on, who has tremendous background, a program director for Les Mills and RPM and other program formats, which he's extremely knowledgeable about. He did that for a number of years, worked with brands like TRX, head of their training and programming over there, which was phenomenal work he had done with them. And then more recently with Under Armour, and now he has joined GoodLife out of Canada with our friend Patch Evans, with that group, now overseeing their fitness programming, et cetera. Dan is just a longtime friend who I've known for a decade. And so we wanted to invite him on the show to give his thoughts. So I really hope you enjoy this interview with our friend Dan McDonogh. Really found it to be insightful. So please, if you like it, share it. And I hope you've enjoyed some of our more recent virtual content, etc. Please, if you have any comments on this, share it with me at Bryan K. O'Rourke on any of the social channels, or email me, bryankorourke@gmail.com. So without further ado, let's bring in our guest, Dan McDonogh. Well, listeners, as I said in the beginning, in the introduction, we have a great colleague, and very respected colleague joining us. Dan McDonogh. Dan, thanks for making time to visit with the audience. Really appreciate you.
Absolutely, my pleasure, Bryan. Absolutely.
And so we were talking before we got on the recording. You've seen all the webinars and the content and the articles, about what's happened with the pandemic, the number of facilities that shut down, the openings that are happening around the world now. And you hear a lot about that. The question is, what about the fitness professionals? What about the group, the group exercise people, the instructors, the personal trainers, the other folks? That's what I really want to talk to you about now, Dan. Tell me your perspective on this, personally and with your industry insights, please.
Yes, absolutely. And, I'll firstly speak to my experience and what I've gone through during this pandemic. I found myself in very uncharted waters, something where that has been a passion and my purpose for going on 23 years now. I find myself in a really interesting situation where under normal circumstances, I'm full of energy and I make time to give to others. But I found I didn't have that same passion for giving to others when I found myself in this kind of interesting situation. I think by default, as fitness professionals, we're often giving to others before we even think of giving to ourselves. And I found myself having to really be particular of where I was spending my energy. Did I get a ton of requests to jump on the bandwagon of doing Zoom workouts and webinars? Absolutely. And I tried to contribute to that as much as I possibly could. But some days I barely had the energy to even function on a daily basis, Bryan. So I had to really take on this concept of self-care, recognizing that when the industry reopens And if I'm truly going to have the ability and the capability and the desire to give once everything opens, which I believe there will be a big demand from our participants and our clients and our industry, we have to be ready for that. So I've really had to conserve my energy, for lack of a better word. And I think I know actually with chats that I've had with other fit pros that they might be scared to admit that, but a lot of us are kind of in the same situation and having those same feelings.
Yeah, that's very real, very human, and very true. I can really see that. You and I were chatting, and we've read, I think I shared a few articles with you about what a number of fitness professionals decided to do, because when this happened, it caught a lot of people off guard, and people needed to make an income. Many of them didn't have jobs, and nowadays, with the plethora of various digital platforms, a lot of professionals move to training clients online, classes, et cetera, as you've seen. What's your sentiment about that, Dan? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's interesting. So in my personal situation, I wasn't relying on hourly appointments or hourly classes to make a living, right? So I can speak from my end of that, where it wasn't something I needed to do to kind of put a roof over my head. But I know a lot of people in this industry who had to respond, right? Not by design, but by default, where they've had the mortgage to pay, they've had kids to feed, and they had to find some sort of solution, right? So they were scrambling, trying to find what's the best platform. And even myself jumping on some of these webinars, I'd never used Zoom until this happened. I'd heard about it, but I didn't need to rely on technology to do my daily tasks. So there was even a small learning curve for me. So for those fitness professionals who hadn't had a lot of experience with technology, I know there was a big learning curve. Now there's the one part of this where there is the ability to create content, but then do you have the experience to create the content that's digestible and meaningful? So I think that's where the challenge came in. Speaking from even doing some of the Instagram live workouts that I've had to do, there's a lot of time and effort that goes into making sure you're in the right space and you have the right angles and the light is correct. And I've got a lot of experience delivering to groups of people face to face. But when you're now in a situation where you might be delivering in a platform where you're coaching to one or small groups of people where you may or may not be able to see them, how do you rely on your skills that you've developed in the past? And there's one thing that I say that experience can give you is that when you're in a situation that requires you to rely on all the skills that you've learned over the years to be able to deliver a meaningful experience digitally, I found that all my previous skills from Les Mills and into TRX and then into Under Armour, I was able to bring all of those skills to the forefront and feel comfortable being on technology. But no, I know a lot of fit pros who thought that delivering sessions and group experiences via technology was going to be a lot easier than they thought. And so that's one thing where, and I understand why they've had to respond and do that. And I think some of them have just kind of learned as they went. And I think their clients and their participants are understanding to the situation in the short term. But I think if it's something that they wanted to be sustainable for the long term, and say they decided to not go back to working at a bricks and mortars club and try to have this be sustainable for a long period of time, really understanding these platforms in depth and learning how to speak and deliver in front of a camera would be a skill set that I'd highly recommend.
That makes a lot of sense. And now in your role at GoodLife, tell us what you can about what's happening in Canada with the chain, and what, I know you all are, the things are progressing. For what you can share, I know viewers or listeners would be very interested in hearing some details about that. What's happening in your world there?
Yeah, so up in Canada, the GoodLife clubs are slowly starting to reopen. Right. So, we have kind of up in the Northeast, kind of Prince Edward Island, those areas there where the cases were really, really low. Those are markets that are starting to open. There is, from my understanding, we should have not all clubs, but all markets in Canada open by kind of mid-July. Right. And then obviously in terms of, we've been spending a lot of time making sure that, the group exercise specifically is going to open with what we call safe mode. So really safe standards, choosing to go with programming that's more kind of isolation programming, for lack of a better word. So our members and associates feel completely safe and comfortable. So that's one thing that we've been working on, is making sure that we are going above and beyond to make sure that quote unquote safe mode is being adhered to, so everyone feels comfortable. We want our associates and our members to feel safe going back into our clubs. One thing I really applaud Patch for doing is that he was very adamant that as soon as we closed all of our clubs across the country, that no Canadian was going to have to pay to have access to health and fitness, right? So all members of GoodLife got free access to Les Mills on Demand. We had an app that was getting ready to launch. We had to speed up the launch of that app so our consumers and our members had access to not only Les Mills on Demand, but content on our web platform. And then we started to bring Instagram live workouts 3 or 4 times a day to give Canadians and beyond as much access to health and fitness as they could possibly have. And I think what we have realized is that if we talk about digital, I think what we have certainly realized is that it wasn't something that GoodLife brought huge attention to, right? But I think what they realized is that there's now a separate business with digital, right? Because I think industry-wide, Bryan, I think there's a lot of people now going, you know what, I don't really need to go back into a brick and mortar gym to stay fit and healthy. There is so many options digitally and online now that why would I go back to a gym, especially right now when I'm not quite sure what it's going to look like, what it's going to feel like. And I had a really interesting conversation with a fellow colleague of mine, Bryan, who recently kind of quote unquote retired from delivering group exercise. So he's now a member, right? And I had this conversation with him and he said, Dan, why would I want to go back into a gym when I can do everything from home? And I said, that's a great question. Why would you? He said, the only reason I would go back into a gym, it's not for the programming, right? It's not for the equipment, but it's for the instructor who's delivering the experience, right? So the only reason I would go back is because of the connection I have to that individual. And I think as instructors and personal trainers are trying to decide in this new world that we're living in, do I or do I not go back, right? So that's a big question. And I think members and instructors, including myself, I haven't taught a group exercise class in almost 2.5 months now. And I can't wait to get back and teach. And it's not because I have to, it's because I want to, right? In my opinion, there's nothing like that face-to-face human interaction, that joy that I see on people's faces when they're doing something they didn't think they can do and they're getting stronger, and you have these conversations before and after class. And that's what's meaningful to me. The byproduct of the experience of getting fit and burning calories, I know that's going to happen, right? But for me, it's bigger than that. It's the power of the human connection. And I think a lot of people may think, hey, I can deliver my sessions or do these small group trainings on Zoom. But I think at some point they're going to start to realize that there's something missing, right? There's something missing, and that's that power of the human connection. And I think what we have realized from the digital experience is that, I know right now there's people attending our online, our Instagram live sessions that were not a member of GoodLife, right? But now, because I've got this human connection like we're doing right now, I'm building trust with that person. And this may actually drive this member to now choose to join the gym, right? So there's all these, there's I don't want to use the word, the downside of people getting exposed to technology, but there's a plus side too as well, right? We get that chance to build trust and build that human connection. And maybe there's this person who's never joined a gym, and they've always been scared, and they had these self-efficacy issues, and through these digital platforms, they're getting stronger and they're feeling better and they've got more confidence. You know what? I'm actually going to join a gym now because I feel better about myself. So I think there's some power in that.
I agree. I call it the gateway drug. It's kind of like the gateway drug.
Yeah.
Or as we talked about in the past, I tell people this, and I know they don't see it as analogous, but I believe it is what happened with digital music. In the 90s up to the year 2000, when record companies were going, really getting hurt because they were like, oh, it's the death of the music industry, when the reality was that Once digital really became mainstream in around the year 2000, the number of live concert performances attended tripled around the world in the next decade. And, so because I can listen to West African music I'd never have heard. And now I've learned a whole new genre of something that I can go experience in a way I would have never been exposed to. So I agree with you. I think it grows the pie. Unfortunately, we have to go through this interim pain, but I think in the long run, it's a bigger pie, right?
I agree completely. And I think if I'm a club owner or a studio owner, and I think I can understand why there'd be concern of whether my great talent will want to come back and work for me, right? When I'm possibly taking 40 to 60% of, their hourly session, so you now have these group fitness instructors and PTs going, I'm actually making more doing this on my own. And that's very real. But I think there is, why would I want to go back, right? If this was what I was doing, if I was personal training full-time or relying on group fitness, teaching 15, 20 classes a week, what would get me back into bricks and mortars? Well, there's a few things that would get back me. And obviously the culture that studio or the club is creating. I think in this industry, most of us want to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. So what type of culture are you creating within your bricks and mortars facility? And I think owners need to take a look at what was my culture before and what can I do now to make this even better, not only for my members, but for my associates. One thing that would possibly, if owners haven't done this in the past, that they could offer possibly an education stipend, right, to my group fitness instructors or PTs if I haven't done that in the past. Could I offer them a benefits plan, right? Because there's been many times throughout my career, Bryan, that I've thought about kind of branching on my own and building my Dan McDonogh brand. But could I have? Absolutely. But I've made the choice to stay associated with big brands for many reasons. Part of that has been, a guaranteed paycheck. Part of that has been, having benefits, and that's been my decision, saying whether it's right or it's wrong. And I'm not trying to influence the decision of any fitness professional, but that's been the road that I've decided to go down. So if you're an independent fit pro and you're deciding to go back and work for a bricks and mortar or go to work for a club chain or a boutique studio, these are the things that might attract me back into the four walls of a studio. What's the atmosphere I'm going back to? Is there educational opportunities? Is there some benefits for me, right? Can I be paid more per session? Is there a way for me to go back and negotiate saying, okay, here's the situation. Can we now renegotiate what I'll get paid per class? Can we renegotiate if I'm a personal trainer? What's the percentage that I'm keeping? What's the percentage that you're keeping? So I think if both the Fit Pro and the owners of these facilities, can have healthy conversations around this, I think everyone can win.
I agree. Dan, for our listeners, one last point, and again, we appreciate so much you making time. I know this will be a well listened to podcast. What's some personal advice that you'd give in general in light of this? Because in the coming months, I talked to Tim Keatley earlier today and talked to a number of other folks, and he's telling me about, people returning on the professional side and some of the things you've discussed. As a fitness professional right now, listening to this podcast and listening to you, what are 2 or 3 things that if you could think of any offhand, you would advise people to really stay focused on in the coming weeks?
Yeah. So my priority, as I mentioned earlier on in this conversation, Bryan, is the importance of self-care, right? So just managing your energy. So when the world reopens again, and it's starting to, that you're in not only the physical space, but the mental space to be able to deal with what I believe will be a massive demand for what it is that we do. I personally believe that people are going to be craving human interaction. And right now we've been isolated socially. So just even our interpersonal skills and our ability to have conversations with people, if you haven't been doing that now, I would highly suggest that you do, right? How can you now start, just getting those basic conversation and human interaction skills back, because it's kind of go from no gas to full gas. That's kind of what it's going to be, right? So if you've been kind of laying low, for lack of a better word, in the next couple of weeks, start putting yourself out there. Maybe, accept some podcasts, get out there and have conversations with with other fit pros, just saying, how are you dealing with this? What steps are you taking as you prepare to reopen? And I think those are really, really healthy things to be doing. If you've been getting off a regular schedule, Bryan, right, try and get yourself back on a regular work schedule, like have a consistent bedtime, have a consistent wake time, get yourself in operational hours in anticipation of those operational hours, so it's not a massive shock to your system. I think the skills, Bryan, that we have of programming and delivering choreography, that stuff's never going to go away, right? But it's those other skills now that are going to allow us to have those human interactions with people. And my one big recommendation for personal trainers and group fitness instructors is that keep in mind that not only have we been self-isolated, but our clients and our participants have, and their fitness level is probably not going to be the same. So when you're now delivering experiences or sessions, don't destroy them, right? Make it about the reunion, make it about we're now back together, and give them permission to ease back into it. Don't go back and just smash them with high intensity every single day, because there's going to be this curve of getting back into normal life. So take it easy and make it about the regathering and the human connection, as opposed to physically destroying them, for lack of a better word.
That's great advice, Dan. That is great advice. Well, my friend, I'm so thankful again that you took time to share your wisdom and views with our listeners around the world. As I said in the intro, you've been a great friend and colleague to our team. We've known you for years, and I'm just so happy you and your bride, and with the birth of your child coming soon, that
yes,
all are okay. And I'm just very thankful to you, Dan, for everything.
No, and as I've mentioned several times, Bryan, you're one of my mentors, and you're an amazing leader and forethinker in this industry, and absolutely honored to be spending time with you.
Well, listen, we'll see each other again soon, I hope. And listeners, I want to tell you, please share the podcast. Dan's got a lot of wisdom here, and in the show notes, you're going to see how to follow him and be in touch with him if you haven't already. So, Dan, have a great afternoon, and again, we appreciate it. Hello, listeners. This is Bryan O'Rourke, and thanks so much for listening to the Fitness Plus Technology Podcast. The podcast is made possible by the Fitness Industry Technology Council, a consortium of global brands working together to enhance the adoption of technologies in the fitness space. Our company, Videri Ventures, which is invested in Vertimax, Montezuma, Gold's Gym, Houston, Texas, and Fitness 24/7 Thailand, also underwrites the podcast, along with our service companies, Integris Advisors, Moon Mission Media, and others. Please feel free to share this podcast with your colleagues. And if I can be of any assistance to you, don't hesitate to reach out, bryanko'rourke@gmail.com, or find me on any of the major social networks. Have a great day, and thanks for listening.